The Zone Coverage Podcast Network.
Ready.
Let's do it.
Let's do it. Minnesota Soccer Podcast in the house. As I'm going to share a text message on this podcast.
I'm going to share a Tinder message afterwards.
I'm going to share a text message from Nic Hallett in regards to our planning of this podcast so that we can go in with low expectations. And you as the listener can go in with low expectations. A direct quote from Nic Hallett as we were setting up our time for today. But since this podcast isn't taking place at my home, I'll probably perform very poorly, just like Minnesota United. Nic Hallett, your thoughts on your text message?
Quality comedy is what that text was.
And you got no response. We're very disappointed. Tom gave you the ha.
Yeah, which I didn't know was if that was like a legitimate ha or like a
was
that was weak, bro.
No,
I had to leave you hanging, but I appreciated the comment.
Let's just talk about the ambiguity of texting and using the word ha. Like, that could be like, ha! Nice, dude. Or it could be, ha.
Yeah,
Let's try.
I might have messed up. Just bad communication, frankly.
Shout out to my ex-girlfriends. This is why I don't text that often. You know what I mean? Like, it's too ambiguous.
Hell, it's protected. He's a sensitive man.
So
this is also true.
So while we're briefly on this topic, are you guys phone call people? Do you like talking on the
Heck
phone?
yes.
Oh no, I text.
Ladies, call me.
I prefer to call, but I text more than I call.
Well, and that's such an interesting thing because I prefer to call too for the most part, and I feel like that's a stereotype that most millennials, which the three of us all definitely are, prefer to text rather than talk. So Nick and I both preferring the phone conversation side, I think, are a little bit outliers.
Just
but that's cool.
Old school, really. Old school.
Yeah, no doubt, though. Like, I mean, talk about much better medium, and like, honestly, I find it unattractive if like a lady wants to text rampantly rather than because if you can't hit it, back and forth on the phone, then you're not gonna be able to hit it.
What are you doing?
We got the hot takes coming in strong from Nic Hallett. This is gonna be a good episode.
He's a big phone guy.
So
Alexander Graham Bell on the podcast.
Shouts to AG the OG AG Bell.
Nice.
All right, we're into the content. Well, so
we're gonna talk about soccer.
We're gonna talk about soccer now because this is already gonna be really fun. So Minnesota United, they played a game yesterday. They were recording on Sunday night. The game was on Saturday night, late here, relatively normal in Vancouver, where they played. As you might expect, they were on the road, and they lost. I had this conversation with my fiance, who I've talked about before on this podcast, doesn't really watch soccer much, and she's like, I told her I was optimistic about them going into this game because they seem to have figured some stuff out. They seem to be the 3-5-2 is working. They've got their full lineup ready to go. They've had a week off after this busy stretch. I'm going in with some hope here. And she's like, no, they're on the road. They're going to lose. That's how this works. So shout out to my fiance who had better soccer analysis than I did about this game.
Yeah,
Nic Hallett.
She was spot on.
Yeah, Nic Hallett. You watched this game. Is it that simple?
On some level, it is. The real quandary that I can't put my finger on is what is it about playing on the road that is so darn difficult for these guys? And not that playing elite professional soccer isn't a tall task in and of itself, but I don't understand. I mean, can we brainstorm right now, the three of us? What do we think what's causing this? You talk about early on in their franchise's history, being bad on the road makes perfect sense. New team, rough, low talented squad, but they have continued to build this team. They've gotten much better, and they were on the best form of their franchise history on a 3-game win streak. So you'd think if at any point that they could buck that trend of being poor on the road, it would be this weekend against Vancouver, but it was completely not the case. And let's get one thing straight. Vancouver is wildly talented attacking wise. I didn't realize that, but they honestly, between Alphonso Davies and their other attacking mid, whose name is escaping me, but was slippery as can be, they honestly have two guys who are like Darwin Quintero ability right there. And then they also have Kai Kamara, who is one of the the leading scorers in MLS history. And then they have Breck Shea, not even playing, coming off the bench. And then they got a couple other solid guys. They can play, and they can attack. And so they are a quality opposition. But, man, Minnesota United just, I don't know what their deal is. What would you guys fathom is that issue for them? Is it because they have to fly coach? Is it because they don't have their own plane? Like, I don't.
It seems so hard to put their finger on, and like it's not like their road losses have all been to exceptional teams. If we look back at the losing spree in April and May that kind of started this, they were two of the losses to start the streak were at Portland, who were really struggling to start the season, and at Seattle, who were really struggling to start the season, and they lost at San Jose to open the season. Like, it's not like they've just been on the roads to like your LAFC, who they lost to Sporting Kansas City, who they lost to. Like, that's, you expect those losses because those are two of the best teams in the league. Yeah, but when it's against a team like Vancouver, who in theory, these two teams went into this game a point apart in the standings, both right on the edge of the Western Conference playoff picture. You have to be able to take something from this point if you're a real threat to the playoff team. And as you wrote in your recap and player ratings of this game, published on zonecoverage.com, go read them. This is not a team with realistic playoff aspirations if they can't figure this out.
Yeah, it's impossible. Like I wrote, the math just doesn't add up, and obviously at some point you have to play some playoff games on the road. So you really have to figure it out. I can't figure out who to blame more, because on one hand it's like, all right, players, what's up? Like, you stink on the road. That's your fault.
Motivate yourself. Yeah.
Something. But like, on another hand, I look at Adrian Heath and it's like, dude, you know that this is an issue for your team. You know this is one of the biggest bugaboos your team has to deal with. So you have to do something to buck this trend. You're 1-9 on the road. Like, how can you not just you got to try something else but again, then you're stuck between a rock and a hard place, because he's coming off a 3-game win streak and he went with the same lineup that won all those games. Well, I don't know what you do.
So do you wrote about, because you reviewed Adrian Heath's performance in this game as a part of your rating.
Yeah.
And at halftime,
he got a low rating for 2 reasons. Hit me with whatever you can hit me with, but he got a low rating for 2 reasons. Go ahead.
Halftime, they're down 1-0.
Mm-hmm.
Seem to have held up okay against the threat, have been around in attack. So you're not going to make any aggressive halftime substitutions because that doesn't feel necessary. Then you see the goal go in the 56th minute from Davies, 64th minute from Kai Kamara. When does the change have to happen for you?
That's a good question, and that's where I disagree.
Because you were on topic of Ibarra and Dunlady, Romario and Dunlady changed the game.
Yes.
But when does that have to happen?
And they were the right subs, but coaching at this level, you're going to be taken to task about your timing too, because it was the right decision. Clearly, they improved the team dramatically. They both individually played really well, but the timing was off. He had to do it earlier. Like, on one level, you could read it like, okay, played pretty well in the first half. They're not like really up against it, so let's keep riding with the starters. But that's not the mood of this game. Not where I was at. The way I took it in was that this needs to change because this is weak. They looked pathetic. And I say that from a point of, this is a team I've seen play a lot. You know what I mean? Like, I'm not just saying, like, oh, these guys stink. I'm saying, like, I know their standard of play, and they were off. They were weak. They were slow. They were not doing anything successfully going forward. They just looked poor across the pitch and needed that change, and they were trailing. And a couple guys individually were playing really poorly. Ramirez could do nothing. He was stymied from beginning to end of his time on the field. Ibson was pretty darn poor.
Ibson was Ibson.
And he was the bad side of Ibson, right, as we talk about. And so, to me, it was clear that something needed to change early, and he made the change at 3-0. And that's unacceptable. And that's a huge reason that he gets a low rating. The second is my point that I was alluding to earlier, which is you know what your team is on the road. Do something. to shake it up. Do something.
Whether it's because the way it sounds like, again, they start 10 of the same 11 players that started the 3 games in 8 days, the 9 points at home.
And maybe that's a part of this, too.
It might be, because it might be fatigue.
That might be the biggest, because that's what they looked. They looked tired.
The only change was Eric Miller coming in for Alexi Gomez, who had come off with an injury. And again, it was that same line that you looked at going into the game against LAFC. Is this too much? Is this too many minutes? Is the fitness too much? Yeah. And because what you say about lethargy, that's what the Houston game looked like.
Yes,
that one game on the road, it looked the same.
Dude, this game was a carbon copy until the late comeback, which obviously made things look different, and they were playing well in the final 15 minutes. But other than that, this was the Houston game reincarnated. Mm-hmm. It was. That's what it was. I don't know that you could, on one hand, I want to give them the fatigue, let off, but they had a week off. They had
a full week off.
What else? You should be primed. You should be perfectly set.
It's so hard to wrap your mind around, because it feels like such a simple problem, but one that has proved pretty impossible to solve for this team this season, because every single player in the locker room knows about the statistic. Adrian Heath knows the statistic. We've asked them about it over and over and over, including during this win streak at home. I talked to Adrian Heath. I talked to Brent Coleman about how do you take this mentality from home where you are tremendously successful, getting results from top teams, and how do you fix it against mid-level teams on the road?
I know. And that's one of the things I was thinking as I watched this game was wow, this game, if you had never seen Minnesota United play, but you knew soccer and you watched this game, you'd be like, this team shouldn't even be in this league. At times. That's what it looked like. But because we know this team, we know they can play with anyone. They smashed LAFC. They can compete with anyone. And so that's what's so mind-boggling is they looked like a JV team for most of this game.
And that's been the case so many times this season. It's just the gap in quality is so obvious between them and their opponents. And then you look at the home games, and the gap in quality between them and their opponents is obvious the other way.
To me, one thing that's a theme that I seem to find, and again, I think Heath, I respect Heath. I'm not nearly in the camp of calling for Heath's job at all. But one of the things whenever I feel like Heath is making a mistake, it's because he seems to be afraid to not be bolder at times, and that's what it felt like in these situations. Is he's a little, which is so odd given his personality, because he seems like the bold type, especially the way he talks and all these other things. So I just think he lacks the dynamicness to be extra bold at times, and that's what this team needs. What I will say though, if we look, and also it's really not just one or the other. It's definitely partly the players and definitely partly Heath. Let's go to the Ibson moment. The game was in the balance. It's 1-0, and he tries a back heel pass with a guy on his back, which makes no sense, and he's in his own defensive third. Talk about reckless, talk about unnecessary, and yeah, that he turns that over in that way, and Alphonso Davies puts it in the back of the net not 4 seconds later, and the game's 2-0, and then they're running rampant. So that's purely obviously an individual error too,
and that's an Ibson.
Yeah, and I think it's funny, and I think it's good. I think Minnesota United Twitter is moving a little away from being hashtag Adrian Heath out,
yeah,
and now pointing out things like Ibson out of the starting lineup, which is fair. And a decent point.
And going back, Heath always mentions he wants more talent. We know designated players coming in. They still have a slot to use. This is becoming kind of a joke. You even alluded to it with your player ratings. But do you think with more talent he'd be more creative, or do you think that this is more of a coaching tactic or a coaching flaw, if you want to call it?
It's gonna be so fun next season when knock on wood, he's got the two Colombian DPs, Quintero and Rodriguez, or Robertson, whatever.
Whatever.
I like how your eyes lit up because you knew I was coming for you on that one. He'll have Molino back, which will be really fun.
Yeah.
Finley will be able to provide something. Ibarra will have had a relatively successful season. Romario Ibarra is in the field. All these other guys, he'll have so much at his disposal, and he'll have had another off season to add guys. If he mentions needing more players, like in the first 5 games of next season, I'm gonna die.
You can raise your hand and be like, "Yeah, I talk trash to my opponents and then get beat up in games. I'm good. I'll go in. I'll jump in there."
Right? Yeah. Sign me up.
Hallett, by the way, came in here fully dressed in soccer gear, limping. He has his knee is exposed. He got a rash there, not a rash, but like a
cherry.
Yeah, cherry.
Strawberry. I don't know.
Yeah, I don't know. Worst case scenario, you can make an offer here.
Yeah, but he will no way have a leg to stand on in that regard.
Yeah,
is my point next season, and so how's he going to
Does your instinct tell you though that he has more creativity in him, or do you think that he's naturally kind of more conservative as a coach?
Well, I mean, it's just funny to me because I think his methods are right. His tactics are right. It's like let's do a crossboard, as we love to do.
Let's do it.
Thibodeau's defensive tactics are probably right. He just doesn't have the guys to execute it, and that's the same thing here at Minnesota United. Heath's tactics are smart and probably highly effective, but he's right in some ways that he doesn't have the guys to execute it. But it's going to be really hard to make that argument next year, and it's really hard because I think he needs to change things a little quicker and whatnot. And one of the things he finally did was change the formation about 6 games ago, and the team's had wildly more success ever since doing that. And so it's dude, you finally make one change and nothing but positives happen. In this game, his team's being trounced, makes 2 aggressive substitutions, team plays dramatically better. Dude, make changes earlier.
Is this what you're seeing too, Naylor?
Yeah, I want to believe in Adrian Heath's tactics, especially because it seemed like he found a system rather than sticking to continue the Thibodeau reference, rather than sticking to a system that doesn't seem to fit his players and the staff that he has. Heath made this change to 3 at the back.
Yeah.
Which, as we have said at length on this podcast, gets your 3 best defenders on the pitch at the same time. Wasn't happening at the start of the year. Shifts some guys around into different roles that seem to be working to get the best out of them. So he made this adaptation to a different system. And while, yes, he still needs guys, he's tried something different, and it appears to have been successful to a degree. Now he's got this next problem to solve, because as we remember before this change, they were losing everybody. Maybe that's partially the road, maybe it's whatever have you, but it feels like he needs more guys for depth. It feels like the ever-pressing question of when is he going to sign a real number 6? A real defensive midfield stopper that's proven in MLS, that isn't a Maximiano, who is a prospect question mark who could develop into something great. He's not what they need right this second.
You're not wrong. It's so bizarre how poor Maximiano's been. That just doesn't make sense. That's weird.
He was what. I think the problem with Maximiano is partially in our perception of him, because you look at the signing at face value and he's literally everything you could possibly ever want him to be ever.
Yes.
And then he just isn't that player either yet or ever. And I think from our analytical side, we may have expected too much of him just because we didn't know. Yeah. That's my opinion. But it's the degree of you need to go sign somebody who can. It's almost like they need to go make a trade for somebody who can do it in this league at this level right now today.
Yeah, and a little bit to Heath's point of continuing wanting new players. Sam Cronin would have been that guy, and Sam Cronin's been out all season because of a concussion issue. So that's That's too bad because that he did add stability when he arrived from Colorado. That's exactly what you asked for, right? That's how they acquired Cronin, and so that's been unfortunate.
And it's like you said, it doesn't seem like it's something that might get addressed this offseason, this transfer window right now.
No,
just doesn't seem likely based on the squad construction, based on where they're signing now. It seems like it goes in like it was probably the number one priority going into last offseason. It goes into this offseason as like the number 1 5-star circled in bright red ink X everything possibility is this is what we need more than anything else.
Yeah,
and it's so abundantly clear.
Yeah, I'll be absolutely flabbergasted if they don't. If they sign another DP and it's not. You know,
yeah, exactly.
I think actually a number 8 is the most ideal. Just so you have that range, a guy who can be kind of a 6 and have 10 qualities. Just an all around box to box midfielder just would be so nice.
Give me an example player. Maybe one that not necessarily is realistic for them, but who's like the quintessential player you're thinking of right now?
Yeah, like a Premier League guy.
Yeah.
Pogba is in that same ilk. You don't need someone remotely as like high upside offensively, but kind of that guy who's that big and rangy, who's fast, can make the tackles and make every pass needed, and dribble a little at times, and finish if needed at times. So Pogba. I mean, obviously,
but
10 tiers below that.
Well, the thing is, you want the model, right?
Yes.
Is you want to look at the best. You can look at the best players in the world and say, I want like the MLS tier of that skill set.
Yes,
that's what we want.
Nick wants Pogba. Let's not sell United short here.
And I want Eric Dyer. So. Because I want someone more defensively minded that brings a lot of the same qualities, but also brings that stability, safe passing hands.
I think we can even go with a Tottenham reference. I think more in the lines of Moussa Dembele would be what Minnesota United needs for sure. I mean, speaking of individuals and looking forward to. I think that was an ESPN alert alerting us that Pogba just signed for Minnesota United.
Yeah.
No, it was telling me what's going to happen in the Cardinals game that I'm watching right now.
The individuals, though, going forward, I mean, if I'm Heath, we should just talk about Ramirez because he had this performance affected him drastically. And obviously Ibsen had his big mistake. If I'm Heath,
I want to turn this question around. Talk to me about Abu Danladi, who hasn't played in like 6 weeks.
No, that's literally my
was huge in this game.
That's literally my next point is that, and then on top of all that, Abu played really well when coming on and offered a different dynamic for sure.
Scores his first goal of the season.
Yeah, and what was so good about his goal is Abu offers all these other things that Ramirez does in terms of speed, dribbling one-on-one, being able to create in different ways. But the one thing Ramirez offers is timely runs and good finishing, and that's what Abu did on his goal. He did what Ramirez would do. So if he can already do what Ramirez can do, like he showed there, and then all the other Abu stuff, be awesome. Problem is, his fitness is huge question mark. Rodriguez's fitness is a huge question mark. But I'd like to see both of them start up top against Seattle, and then Darwin play in the midfield instead of Ibsen.
And this is
that would be sick.
And
that would be so fun to watch.
You remember when we said that exact thing last week when we talked?
Yeah.
Literally that exact conversation. If Ramirez struggles in this game, that's what's going to happen. Lo and behold, here we are.
Yeah, because there's a question marks around both Abu and Rodriguez's fitness. I find it hard to believe he'll start both of them. But I mean, yeah. Come on, dude. That'd be sick. It'll probably one or the other with... I don't know. I don't think he'll move. I don't know if he'll move Darwin back. I don't know. That's the type of bold move that I'm criticizing him not doing that I think he should do.
Well, and it's one of those things that he does have new pieces now. We've seen Romario now in 2-3 games come in as a sub. We're starting to figure out what's going on there. So now the question is Heath ready to put him in the starting lineup and make that change? Even as we look at their next game, they're back at TCF Bank Stadium, and they've got that home magic back ready to go. We'll see them on Saturday, and they're playing a red-hot Seattle Sounders team.
Yeah, it'd be really interesting. Yeah, that's a really good point, too, is that Seattle's red hot, which is daunting. But, okay, apart from even losing this game against Vancouver, they're on a 4-game home winning streak. So you could see an argument to try to play the same starters relatively. Be fascinating.
I could definitely see him just going right back to it again.
And if they win, credit to him.
Yep, exactly. That's the thing. Like, I questioned it going into the LA game, and they go out and spank LAFC.
Yeah.
Like, I don't know what he's going to do, and I think that's very interesting.
I'm fascinated. I'll be fascinated to see what that starting lineup looks like.
Yeah.
And because I don't want to gloss over it, but I thought Romario Barra was very, very good, and I think the main point I would embark is that he showed, apart from Darwin Quintero, one of the only guys who seemed confident and possessed the ability to dribble 1v1 and take guys on and get around them successfully. And that is a skill set that is very much lacking at times in this team. So if he can bring that could be huge.
So the MLS thing that we have to talk about, we obviously have the Seattle game coming up on Saturday, here back at home in the friendly confines of TCF Bank Stadium for the last time in the month of August and the first time in the month of August. Because after this, they have 5 games on the road in a row.
That's gonna be
so
interesting.
They've got to figure it out, or the season's over. Like, because that's part of the thing is, like, they can go win this game next weekend.
Yeah.
And we still will know nothing about them. Yeah. We will know nothing about what the final result of the season is based on this weekend's game.
Well, yes. I think we'll definitely still learn more about the team.
I agree.
But you're right that we won't know at all.
It super doesn't matter until they do it on the road.
Yeah.
Like, that, plain and simple. They need to win this game. If they lose this game, it's a problem.
It'd be so fascinating if they win this game against a hot, good team, have a 5-game winning streak at home, and then just continue to sputter on the road. That'll be so weird and so confounding.
So the other event happening related to Minnesota United this week is the MLS AllStar Game, which is on Wednesday, which I totally forgot about.
There's so many, because it feels like one of those friendlies.
Yep.
Because it's against Juventus.
It is against Juventus. Minnesota United has their one representative attending the game. Do you remember who it is, Nick?
Calvo?
It's Calvo. It's Francisco Calvo representing the squad. There have been plenty of arguments that Darwin Quintero should be retroactively added, but, you know.
Yeah,
or Shuttleworth, right?
And it feels like.
Or Miguel.
And considering, I would vote Shuttleworth, but or Quintero.
Or all of them.
Yeah.
I mean, if they had a better record, that'd be in play, right? It doesn't.
I'd really just like to see Shuttleworth get awarded that because, we all know what Darwin is, and he gets lots of plaudits, and I just think. Anyway, Calvo's. I don't know that he legitimately earned that. I mean, he was poor form for much of the beginning of the season, and it feels like he's very talented, and he's MLS All-Star ability level. But I don't know why he would have made this team.
Especially
I think
Quintero seems so good.
And I think it's very much one of those. Well, I think the voting on it was a bit, early on.
Yeah,
Quintero's been red hot the last
I was going to say,
weeks.
it's the timing for Quintero, I think, is the biggest thing. I think he's in a heartbeat if it happens now.
So my ultimate point is just that I think Calvo made this team because they want at least one representative from every team.
And the question in terms of goalkeeping specifically is Brad Guzan got the fan vote, Atlanta's goalkeeper, longtime U.S. national team standby, good for one of the best teams in the Eastern Conference. I have a hard time arguing with that at least a little bit.
But who's the backup?
Zach Steffen from Columbus,
who has been supposed to be really good.
Who has been dubbed the future of U.S. goalkeeping, seems likely to move to Europe if Columbus is moved away from Columbus to Austin. Right? Is that level of prospect and has played like it this season. So that's the problem, is there are 2 goalkeepers in the team, and it's hard to construct a case for Shuttleworth, particularly over any of them. Whereas I think you can definitely construct a case for Darwin.
Sure.
And Miguel, I think it'd be interesting to just look around at the comparisons between the other players in the team. It's a lot of players for teams who are higher in the standings than Minnesota, and it's really simple.
Yeah.
That's a lot of what
Would you agree with my assertion that Calvo makes the team just to represent Minnesota?
Yes, 100%.
It's got to be. I don't know why else. Not that he couldn't have earned that, because he has that ability, but
he had not at the time of the selections, and I would not have chosen him at all.
Yeah, based on this season, no way.
So I'm extremely with that. So that MLS All-Stars against Juventus on Wednesday night. Be interesting to see what Calvo looks like in that game, because it is kind of a friendly setting. It's not like I covered the WNBA All-Star game yesterday. It was pretty silly at times, and there were these moments of just people trying to showboat and do whatever they have. And this game has proven to be a pretty seriously taken game over the last few years, because you've got
because for the MLS it matters.
Yeah.
Yes, because MLS wants to show out.
And
show that if we put out all of our best players, we actually can play with this type of level.
So I think that'll be an interesting game to watch.
I have some sources. I have some inside, behind the curtain sources.
Sandy Laura.
You guys don't even know. That's how close I keep my sources.
Go on.
That's why they're good sources.
Tinder.
He's on Tinder being like, can I get some soccer knowledge?
I'm just going to ignore that.
Would anything be more on brand for Nic Hallett than having his sources on Tinder?
That would be awesome. Anyway, one of my good sources informs me that MLS is actually picking up popularity abroad.
Is that right?
Much more than expected. That Minnesota United actually recently got contacted about a fan club that is being started in London for Minnesota United, and that's pretty startling when you consider that there's the Premier League already in England. There's all the subdivisions, the second league, the third league in England. Then they're right next to the Spain League, La Liga. They're right next to Ligue 1 in France. They're right next to the Bundesliga in Germany. You got international soccer to worry about. There's youth teams, all that stuff. And there's a group over there taking interest in specifically Minnesota United, let alone other MLS teams. That's fascinating.
My question, there are some sister teams, right? Or like some arrangements kind of like that?
There's a few, but not that many.
So do you think the popularity is the increase, and maybe this is one and the same, but the increase in level of play in MLS, which is a good thing? Or do you think it's because there are more international players in MLS and people are kind of tracking them from whatever country they come from?
My gut, because I'd be speculating, because I'm not sure. It's something I just found out about, and I'm interested to know why that is.
Yeah.
Because I, for the life of me, can't really figure out why MLS. But, I mean, an MLS, a UK podcast, like a United Kingdom podcast covering the MLS, followed me on Twitter recently. So, it's clearly, picking up interest abroad in that way, too. My gut would be that it's people following the international players that have come here. David Beckham, a decade ago, Zlatan Ibrahimovic, Wayne Rooney now. Those are all guys that featured heavily, specifically for Manchester United, coincidentally, but in England.
But, I mean, Calvo was in the World Cup, right, at one point?
Yeah.
Briefly. And
I think the MLS...
I think the MLS matters in Central America. I think the fact that Europe is the conversation point is very interesting.
That is interesting.
Yes.
Because that's a different point, because you look at the United squad, and you have American players, Central American players, and South American players. They don't have very many European-based players on this team. You've got Rasmus Schuler. You have... Help my brain. There's at least a couple more.
Is there, though? Jerome
Thiessen.
Yep, Thiessen's another one.
There's not many.
So I think it's a lot harder to construct a case for...
Harrison Heath, but he doesn't play.
Well, it's a lot harder to construct a case for the European players to be as full just because there's so much fewer of them. I think the MLS probably gets some pretty good viewing in. But
so many of their DPs, like across the, or a decent amount of the DPs are European based. Sebastian Giovinco, David Villa, Wayne Rooney, Ibrahimovic.
So that's the thing, is the biggest names, but like on a squad by squad level, it's like Minnesota doesn't have a European DP. Their DPs are both Colombian. Like,
yeah, I know, and that's why
that's what's interesting.
I know, and that's why specifically Minnesota United getting a fan club in London is so like what?
Yeah,
like that's so interesting.
You see Mears is England.
Oh right, yep, Tyrone Mears.
So,
but I mean, not a big name. God, that dude like played for multiple Premier League teams, but was never like a guy. Like, you know what I mean? Like, I don't.
So the other point I want to bring up is just kind of a reality point. If you are a diehard soccer fan living in the UK, whether natively or
I know where you're going. This is a decent point. But it doesn't explain it all. But
it doesn't explain it all. But they occupy a different time zone and time slot than European-based leagues. Like, because just on the calendar on your daily schedule, because you've got the English League games that take place in the afternoon and in the early evening there, with your headliner, like most of your schedule taking place mid-afternoon in the UK, 9:30 in the morning here, and one like headliner Saturday night football game at like 6 or 7 o'clock in the evening. If you want to continue watching soccer, the Spanish League and the Italian League play after that, but if you're going out and watching games at like 11 o'clock midnight in the UK, you can get you some MLS on. Like, it's a different angle and gets you just... It is a very different league to watch visually, and I think like people that watch like across the different European leagues, watching a game in the Premier League looks different than watching a game in La Liga. You see different things, you see different priorities and different skill sets. The same is true for Serie A, the same is true for the Bundesliga, and I think the same is true for MLS. It's a different game by virtue of
MLS for sure.
Well, by virtue of the players, but also by virtue of like what it goes for. Because MLS is, by virtue of the venues that play, by virtue of the size of the country, is such a physically demanding league. It resembles the Premier League. So some of what you might expect about the Premier League in terms of it's a very physical league. You've got to be like strong and resilient in terms of touch, and it might be less technically skilled than something you might expect in Spain as a stereotype. So it's a different game, and it's extreme conjecture to say that it might look like the Premier League on like Premier League diet extreme. But
is there like an insatiable amount of desire to watch soccer abroad? I mean, is it something that like if there were football leagues in other countries, I feel like some people would just watch football.
That's a great point, right?
Yeah.
How high is the fever pitch for American football in America? And it's kind of a short season, and the off season feels really long, and the games are only once a week essentially.
And the weird Wednesday,
and so yes, that's a great point, because if Europe had the second best football league and it was a different calendar, dude, people like Arif Hassan would be all over that.
For sure.
They'd be watching that like crazy, and people would watch it to like see if there's other guys who could come to the to the NFL. So yeah, you're right. I mean, think about that's the thing we know about Europe: insatiable love for soccer.
Yeah.
And it hits during most of the European leagues off seasons by taking place across the summer, which does help it a lot.
Yep.
I mean, that's so huge for United. Just looking at the revenue picture of, it looks like they'll sell out the stadium, and there's excess demand, at least as of today, right, or right now. But you're certainly going to have you're on FSN, so you're going to have that exposure. And then it's a little like the Wolves or some of these other teams here that have some popularity elsewhere.
Well,
I mean, it's huge if you can get people.
And you look
that.
at like them going to do like a preseason training tour in February, or in February next season. If it's a name that is anywhere near a recognizable name in the UK, you go do a preseason training tour in the UK instead of playing USL teams like they did this year in like Chattanooga and Orlando. You're in maybe getting a friendly or two against the championship side. Like, that's...
What do you have against the Nuga?
I'm just saying that I think they would get...
that makes a lot of sense.
Both higher quality training and higher quality of match preparation in friendlies if they were able to have that kind of opportunity. And by being recognizable, that's a step towards that.
Yeah. I just keep picturing Luke Inman watching like NFL Europe film if NFL Europe existed.
Yeah.
I can relate this to the number of people that watch EuroLeague basketball that I follow on Twitter.
Do you know about it? I was going to ask you.
I know some people that watch the EuroLeague basketball, and it's just... It's such again, it's a different level, it's a different game, but there are people who really, really love watching it. Like, they're
looking for Rubio, and you're like, he's just in Utah. Like, he's not that far away.
How do those people feel about Luka Doncic?
Obsessively.
Yeah.
He's the next coming of
what?
Luka Doncic. He's going to be like anyone who follows the European basketball buys every single bit of that hype you can possibly imagine. Like, he's that good, he's been that good.
Who got him in the draft again?
Dallas.
Yeah.
Well, they need it. They suck.
That's how the draft works. So, kind of wrapping that up, I wanted to touch on a few headlines kind of around the world of global soccer, since we are kind of in a little bit of a drier spell than we have been for the last month for Minnesota United, which is okay for the club and for us. So, Nic Hallett, has there been a single transfer move in Europe this season that you can think of that has particularly drawn your eye? There is an easy one, and yes, you can use it as the cop-out.
I'm trying to think. Obviously, you're referencing Ronaldo.
I am referencing Cristiano Ronaldo to Juventus.
They needed help against the MLS All-Stars.
I've heard that reports that he might play, actually, in that game.
Oh, really?
Yeah. But that move is more interesting to me because I wonder who Madrid would replace him with. That's why that move's really interesting, because I think, in 6 months, Ronaldo to Juventus will be interesting come Champions League, knockout stages. But
it's not like Juventus has needed help winning the Italian league for any time in 2010.
Like, literally tell me nothing about Serie A for the next 6 months. I don't even need to know, because who cares? And Ronaldo and Juventus will probably just be walking towards the Scudetto. So, but I don't know. It caught me off guard. And I don't know that I feel like I've seen a lot of really splashy moves.
I have a topical one.
You have a Tottenham one?
No, I have a certain...
You can't, because they haven't signed anyone.
That's true. A certain 17-year-old Canadian midfielder being signed by Bayern Munich this week, and then banging in 2 goals against Minnesota United.
Funny thing about that game is I was watching that game with a friend of mine, and we're both like, well, it'd be interesting to see this dude Bayern Munich just bought, because Bayern bought him, and because he's freaking 17. Like, that's unreal. Yeah. And we watched the first 30 minutes, and we're like, Coleman stopped him once, and then Boxall stopped him once, and we're like, meh, it's not that good. What were they doing? Goes on to just absolutely dangle all 3 center backs at different times, run past Eric Miller numerous times, score 2 goals, and assist the other 2 goals that his team scores in a 4-2 win. He was stunning. His speed is incredible. I
wonder how that social dynamic works. Hey, we're going out in Munich. We're going to go to the beer hall. I'm going to sit at home and watch Netflix.
It's Germany. You can drink it 14.
Yeah, it's probably right.
It's probably not that extreme, but
isn't it 18?
Yeah, it's probably 18.
It's probably 18, but different dynamic.
Is that a fake? You 17?
So, a couple things on Davies. He's the single most expensive outgoing transfer MLS has ever had.
Yep.
For a 17-year-old Canadian. This is the thing to think of that always comes to my mind with this is, a month or 2 ago, it was announced that the U.S., Mexico, and Canada would jointly host the 2026 World Cup. In 8 years, Alphonso Davies is going to be 25 in the prime of his career. Does Canada have anybody else that'll make them worth watching? He's sure a good starting point.
We got Justin Morneau, and we got
Andrew Wiggins.
I mean, it's not too dissimilar to what the U.S. is dealing with Christian Pulisic. Although you'd have to think that
The U.S. is way better than Canada.
I don't know.
No?
I mean, the U.S. is not obviously that great. They missed the World Cup. And Canada has a few guys, and like, who knows? But in 8 years,
It's
right?
the kind of thing like
Anthony Bennett's triumphant return.
Stop! Get out of here!
In 8
I'm surprised
years,
you haven't started listing hockey players since you're cheating, Tom.
Hey, you know what? I'm doing this right.
No, you're not. Get out of here.
Connor McDavid.
We got Thomas Bannock. He's not even Canadian.
Austrian,
He's
dude.
Austrian.
Now get out of here.
They're not good either.
Now get out of here.
So it's just one of those things that like you see that kind of transfer fee and you see that like kind of potential for any 17-year-old going to a club of Bayern Munich stature, and he leaves after the MLS season. He's leaving in January. That was part of the terms of the deal. He finishes this season with Vancouver and then he goes. And you're like, wow, that could really be something. And usually you see the countries on 17-year-olds that are going with these deals. Brazil, Argentina, Spain, Portugal, Croatia. Name this. Canada's an interesting one.
Well, but I don't think you give Canada the credit necessarily. What's cool about this signing from a Minnesota United perspective and as an MLS perspective, and I retweeted a really good tweet that outlined this, is that Alphonso Davies is an MLS product through and through.
Yep.
He wasn't just like he somehow ended up on Vancouver and then they sold him. He was developed through their academy.
He's
and
come
has
up all
been
the way with them
the whole time. So credit to Vancouver. They
immense credit to them for
which
this.
is and it's unfortunate that MLS has a system where transfer fees aren't just deposited into the account of the team that did it. Apparently some of it will get shared throughout the league, but much credit to them because they developed Alphonso Davies, and that's really impressive, and that hopefully speaks to where U.S. soccer can get to going forward. It just so happens, right? It just so happens that he's Canadian, but if he was American, it would be like a massive home run, because that was the one problem with like a Christian Pulisic, is he wasn't he was partially developed here up until he was 16, and then he went to Germany and finished his development and became the world star that he is. If Davies was American, MLS would look so amazing right now to a lot of people, and they still should, because this guy was developed by an MLS team. And this is hopefully the type of thing MLS academies will start to do, especially when you have a country, like the U.S. and like Canada that have good economies and have all these resources.
Because
this can be continued.
Because that's the key. That's the other key thing about this is the goal of MLS academies and MLS team academies shouldn't be to create necessarily players to play in the MLS. It's to get players that are even better than that.
Yes.
It's to get players that can be the best in the world and can make moves to your Bayern Munich, your Chelsea, your all of the above.
Honestly, hopefully the biggest the thing that like benefits most from MLS academies would be the U.S. men's national team.
Bingo.
That would be the best.
So speaking a little bit about MLS transfers, I saw Jeff Ruder of The Athletic report that there continues to be nothing imminent about Christian Ramirez, but teams are calling and Minnesota's listening. I think the teams that he shouted out were Dallas before they acquired a striker, and
Colorado,
and Salt Lake, and I forget who the third one was, but there are people keeping their eyes on it. It's Salt Lake and Kansas City are the ones that he specifically named as making inquiries.
Kansas City?
Mm-hmm. So the MLS transfer window closes on August 8th, which is a week from Wednesday.
It's such a bummer, because the trade that sent a forward to FC Dallas, Colorado was with Colorado, and Colorado received Kellen Acosta, who is a starter for the U.S. men's national team, and a center mid, and a box-to-box center mid. That would have been perfect if they could have traded Christian Ramirez for Kellen Acosta, and then you also have the huge added media bonus of having a bona fide U.S. men's national team regular in your team. all those things. Like, that would have been such a good trade for Lagos and the front office. It's too bad that didn't come to pass.
The other interesting thing in regards to MLS transfers is I saw a rumor, I don't think it's been finalized or anything at all yet, that FC Cincinnati are signing Fernando Adi from Portland and Fatai Alashe from San Jose for the rest of this season.
Wow.
Going into next season as their first in MLS. And
that's bold.
Those are some pretty, like, Adi has been huge for Portland over the years. And I know that, like, it was reported, like, Adi's trade, I think, was reported for sure yesterday because he scored it. He came on as a sub after the reports had been that he'd been, like, was in the process of being traded, scored a game-winning goal for Portland.
My gosh.
Got a curtain call from their fans at home, which that's a heck of a way to go out if it's his last game for Portland.
Seriously. That's
so,
hard.
and those are
it's tough for Portland fans.
Well, and that's the kind of thing, like, you look at Minnesota. Nick, you're obviously going to go more on the side of it. Minnesota in their last USL season, entering their first MLS season. I don't think they made signings of that level going into their first season in MLS.
No, absolutely did not. Point of clarification, not that it really matters. They were in the NASL, not the USL, but it's kind of the same concept. Anyway.
That's a podcast worth of discussion, the relationship between those two leagues and how much of a disaster it's been for the last 5 years.
Yes. But no. I mean, like, the big announcement was signing Ibarra and Ramirez, who had been on the second division team the whole time.
So I think I thought that was really interesting to see that they're already trying to make those moves and already integrating.
Yes, it's definitely in contrast. And it's but we've known that is clearly the ethos of how Minnesota United has planned to do this the whole time, is start slowly and build slowly and have a 3-year plan, have the, timed with the new stadium, all those things. That's what it is. FC Cincinnati going more
the Atlanta United model,
but not, because they're going with, like, established MLS people.
Yeah.
Kind of.
It's kind of the middle road, I guess.
Yeah, it is. So, fair play to them. I think it makes lots of sense.
So, last little Minnesota topical headline: we have 2 established international teams playing at US Bank Stadium on Tuesday, including my beloved Tottenham Hotspur and AC Milan.
Are you going to survive this?
Yes, I will.
Good.
I survived them. Fun thing about this International Champions Cup, which has been going since Friday the 20th and goes through Saturday the 11th of August, just with various international teams involved playing in various stadiums across the U.S. Tottenham played Barcelona on Saturday night and lost in penalties. Because apparently we have to decide these games by penalties in a glorified exhibition.
Yeah, it's weird.
Hey, that's the best part.
No, it's not. No one cares about penalties in this setting. It's great in the World Cup. Nobody cares enough in a friendly.
Why can't you do something like crazy, like trick shots? Like, imagine these guys just doing...
Like soccer horse?
Yeah. Yes, can we do this? Please?
That actually sounds
That actually would be kind of dope.
You don't usually have a ton of good ideas on this podcast.
I'm with that one.
I'm finishing strong.
So Tottenham Milan on Tuesday. I will be at the game. I will be not in the Tottenham supporters section, but I will be sitting directly above it for reasons. I think it's going to be cool. Apparently, there are still plenty of tickets available, so get out there and go to the game, because it's not often you get a chance to see players of this caliber play right here in Minnesota.
Yeah, and there's ticket sales are down, like, nationwide, but, like, this game shouldn't be one of those because Tottenham has a lot of its starters here.
Yeah, like, it's going to be a pretty full squad.
And same for AC Milan, actually. Mm-hmm. Like, so, yeah, I think this is one of the best ones to go to based on what the teams Barcelona's putting out, Manchester United's putting out. This is really one to go see.
Yeah, and I'm quite pleased on a certain level that the first game I will see at US Bank Stadium is a soccer game. Just as a point to prove.
Yeah,
and who needs the NFL?
Yeah.
Not that great.
Yeah.
With that said, it's about
make sure to listen to our NFL podcast.
I was going to say, with that said,
take.
if you're actually interested in the NFL, we have a great training camp guide by Arif Hassan on the Zone Coverage website. Comes with some great deals to a year-long subscription to the website. Feel free to check that out online. We've got people at training camp every single day. It's going right now. I saw a lot of content from our guys that were there today.
Our guys kill training camp.
Yeah, whether it's video, audio, or in writing. Yeah.
Yep, and we've got your Timberwolves content. We've got I don't know what the Wild guys are doing right now.
Yeah, not a lot.
Season
Hockey
2.
kind of goes dead. I mean, basketball does to some extent, but hockey really does in August. I mean, you know that. And, like, yeah. The
Tom
Lynx,
Schreier,
you guys wrote.
are the Twins going to sell at the deadline?
From my knowledge, when the way they sold was hilarious. They found out about Escobar because one of the reporters saw on a screen behind Molitor that he had been traded. Obviously, Falvey and Levine were not thrilled that Molitor didn't hear first, and then the reason why Matt Belisle gave up the home run to Mookie Betts, and he was used in a situation to use Ryan Presley. Ryan Presley, however, traded in the 4th inning. So yeah, it's been a kind of an interesting sell-off. But yeah, Twins in sell-off mode. I don't think full fire sale mode, but definitely selling off parts.
Is Dozier leaving?
I think Dozier's gone. I think the question is Gibson or Rodney or kind of dismantling a pitching staff that's been successful. Odorizzi to a much lesser extent. I think it's interesting. Not full sale mode, but they are getting, especially for a relief pitcher, for a utility guy, getting some top prospects back. System wise, obviously not national, but seems like a good thing. But it does indicate, Buxton Snow's got to get going, and they got some time.
What a nightmare those two have been.
Yeah, it's not. Sano is back, replacing Escobar. Buxton, who's dealt with a lot of injuries this year, should be back by the end of the season.
See, Tom can sound smart when we let him talk about things he knows about.
Yeah,
there
right.
you go.
Right.
And as you
knew he had it in.
As you mentioned, we do have also some great WNBA content.
Yeah.
I covered the WNBA AllStar Game for the site yesterday, which was at Target Center, which was an awesome game.
It was packed. It was what, 15?
15 over 15,000, biggest attendance at WNBA All-Star Game since 2007.
Wow.
A 5% increase over last year in Seattle. Really, really fun game.
Yeah.
Amazing three-point contest at halftime of the game, which if you have not watched the highlights of the three-point contest,
Really?
Allie Quigley's final round after the finals were tied and they had to go to a third round of 25 threes. Her final round, 29 of 34 possible points on her third set of 25 threes in about 7 minutes.
Jeez.
It was one of the most insane shooting displays I've ever seen, male or female.
Yeah.
And it takes a minute and a half of your time. Go watch the highlights. They are worth it. Her shot is beautiful. And it was a great experience to be there for. I've got a recap up on zonecoverage.com. I might get a little bit more written about the perspective of having it in Minnesota. Maya Moore winning her third straight MVP of the All-Star Game, which, in case you're keeping track at home, no WNBA All-Star Game in 2016. She's won WNBA All-Star MVP in 2015, 2017, and now 2018. The Lynx won titles in 2015 and 2017.
However,
just putting that out
interesting season, and why you guys should be following along is the Lynx are not guaranteed to win.
No,
I mean, they're never
not.
guaranteed to win, but they've struggled early this season.
Teams
playing
2
now.
through 8 in the WNBA are separated by 2.5 games at the All-Star break. Top 6 make the play. I think top 6 make the playoffs.
Yeah,
I think that's right.
Sounds right.
So it's one of the most interesting WNBA seasons we've ever had. One of the most competitive. Teams top to bottom are competitive every night. The Las Vegas Aces, the team's newest team, are one of the most fun teams to watch in the league. It's a great time to get into women's basketball. So check that out. We've got content all across every Minnesota sport you can think of. We'll have Minnesota United. I'll look at the Seattle game coming up next week. I will be there. Nick Hallett, will you be in the house for the Seattle Sounders game?
Yes. Yes, sir.
We're doing it.
Hashtag at zone coverage.
Yeah.
So we got your coverage of that, as the name goes. And with that, we will be back next week with another episode of the Minnesota Soccer Podcast.
Holla.
From Nick Hallett at Prince Hallett, Tom Schreier at T-Schreier3, David Naylor at Prof. Cedar. This has been the Minnesota Soccer Podcast, and we will see you next week.